All right, Perla Mendoza, thanks for coming on South Coast Counseling. I got the opportunity to meet you about a month ago, and we had a really great lunch, and it was a very fascinating story about you and your son and what you're doing now to combat fentanyl, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It means a lot.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about you. You grew up in Santa Ana?
No, actually, I grew up in Los Angeles County, and moved to Orange County when my son was in preschool, actually. Yeah. So I've been here for over 15 years, and this is home now. I live in Seal Beach, actually.
Okay.
And I love it there.
Yeah. And so you moved here when your son's name was
Elijah. His first name was Daniel.
Okay.
And middle name Elijah. He went by Elijah.
Okay. Went by Elijah. And so you moved him here in preschool, and you moved to Northern Orange County, right?
I did. So initially we lived in Los Alamitos. Okay. And that's where we spent most of our time. And then it's only been about 8 years that I've been in Seal Beach now.
Okay.
So neighboring cities.
Yeah. So you moved to Seal Beach, and when Elijah was in what? He
was in the 11th grade when we moved to Seal Beach.
Okay, so he was a junior. Yeah. So he started high school at Los Alamitos High School.
He did. He went to elementary school in Los Alamitos, junior high, and high school.
Okay. And what kind of kid was he growing up?
Oh, he was so cool. Yeah. I love my baby. He was really sweet, always very thoughtful, respectful. I always had compliments regarding his behavior and mannerism. He was different, I'll tell you that. Like, I'm not just hyping him up because he's my kid, but he was very, he was just very, like, empathetic. Yeah. You know, he was a feeler. Like, if he noticed that someone was maybe uncomfortable or down, he'd take the time to ask, like, how are you doing? What can I do to help you? Yeah. I'll give you an example. His birthday is on Christmas Eve, so he would always get double gifts. And one year, I want to say it was his 9th grade year in high school, he came back home one day after winter break, and he says, Mom, you know, there's this kid, Bobby, he just, you know, we all showed up to school with all of our new gear from Christmas, and Bobby's wearing holy shoes, and, you know, his mom died, and he was just so touched by it. That year, he had gotten about 7 pairs of Nike Jordans from different family members for Christmas, and he said, Mom, can I please give him a pair? Yeah. And so he was just thoughtful. Yeah. You know, it was a joy to have him. He was funny. Yeah. You know, he was a reader. He was actually really conservative too. Growing up, I like to say I'm a recovering Democrat. Okay. And he was always like, like he had this intuition, like some wisdom that I couldn't even see at the time. But he's missed. Yeah. He was super funny though. He loved playing basketball and working out, and he loved rapping and making music. Yeah. So growing up in Los Al, just a normal kind of life, and having a good time, and had friends, did well in school. He excelled in high school. I mean, I hate to like put my business out there, but I think he like book smart. That kid was way smarter than I was.
Right. Yeah.
You know, he had all the AP and honors classes starting off in high school. Yeah. He was definitely my pride and joy.
Yeah. So 9th grade. So was he? Did you ever see any signs of him when he was like younger, before he started getting?
This boy was the type of kid, I mean, growing up, he wanted to be a detective, you know, he wanted to be like a James Bond type of dude. Right. And, you know, I come from a family that has struggled with addiction. And so, you know, I would talk to him about things very early on. And he was like that kid that would wear the red ribbon bracelet, and my body's my temple, and I don't do drugs. So when he started experimenting with drugs, it completely blindsided me. Yeah. Because for so long, I mean, he was serious about that, and then he started to change. I thought maybe he was just going through puberty, right? You know, being a grumpy boy, kind of withdrawing from mom, didn't necessarily want to hang out with me all the time anymore, and I figured, okay, well, I was a single mom.
It's going through the teenage years.
He's going through the teenage years, and okay, this is like the rite to passage, you know. Yeah. I'm gonna back off a little bit, but we were very close. I mean, we spoke every day and about everything, really. Yeah. And initially, I started noticing like a withdrawal from all those things that he would like.
Right.
He was taking a EMT course. He was also interested in becoming a firefighter.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of those dreams and ideas that he would share with me were starting to kind of disappear. He wasn't talking about those things. He started to withdraw, and I didn't really know how to help him.
What age was this?
This was about 16.
Okay, so maybe like 10th grade.
The end of 10th grade.
Okay, still at Los Al High School.
Yep, a popular kid. He was the 9th grader that had six-pack and muscles, so all the, senior kids were like, dude, you got to put me on your workout routine,
Right.
He was that kid, he enjoyed reading. I remember him, the first time he ever really talked about a girl, he texts me from the gym, and he says, Mom, my dream girl, I think I just seen my dream girl, and I'm like, at the gym? And he was like, yeah. I'm like, oh, what's so special about her? And he's like, she's reading and running at the same time.
Oh, wow.
He was so impressed.
Yeah.
But yeah, unfortunately, my boy was holding some stuff that I didn't know about. And
so 10th grade, you just noticed him starting to withdraw.
I think as the girls started to like him more, I started noticing it change. Like he was almost uncomfortable with it. And then his attitude was kind of like short. And
right.
he seemed more like withdrawn.
Yeah.
And just not as excited about all the things that he once liked. And I thought, oh, maybe he's having girl problems, Okay, if it's not this whole puberty thing, then maybe he's just being a grumpy teenager. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so, because he wasn't really opening up to me, I started noticing when he had this beautiful girlfriend, Sydney. And she was so sweet and thoughtful. She would come over in the morning, and I'd drive them to school together. She would pack them, you know, little lunches, and he loved her and appreciated her. But I would notice, like, he would get kind of uncomfortable when she'd be too touchy-feely.
Yeah.
And kind of even like, okay, enough. And I'd be like, well, that's kind of...
Right.
Boys usually like that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, you know? And what I later found out was, you know, some heavy stuff that he had went through.
Yeah.
As a kid, and he was holding on to that. And I think having girlfriends and going through this new phase in his life, if you will, triggered some of those things.
Right.
You know, Elijah was sexually abused by his father.
Yeah.
Sometime between the ages of 6 and 9, and you know, he held that in for all those years. Actually, I didn't know about this until he was 19, and by that time there was very little that I could do because of his age. Now he's in treatment, struggling, but while he was in treatment, he opened up and shared that had happened to him. And you know, obviously I was like mama bear. I'm like ready to fight. And his therapist that was working with him says to me, you know, all this, because when he told me, I was like, what? Why didn't you tell me? How, you know, it's not okay. I wasn't mad at him. I was just like, that's my baby.
Right.
You know, someone hurt my baby, and I was just surprised that he never shared anything with me. He says that he was afraid of losing me. He thought that I would, because, you know, I would say things like, if anybody ever messes with you, you know, I will kill them. You know, I'd say stupid things like that sometimes. And so I think he really believed me. And he just didn't want mom to get in trouble if I ever found out. So, yeah, I think that was like a trigger for him, having girlfriends. And then that kind of came up. And probably, I mean, we didn't get to talk about it in detail because he died shortly after.
Yeah. Not only is that a trigger, you know, when we uncover stuff with myself and other people as addicts, there's some kind of trauma or something that happened to us early in life that we're using to suppress because we don't know how to deal with it. So, So when's the first time you found out that he was using or smoking pot or drinking or anything like that?
So the very first time was at a dance. He had went to a high school dance, and he had he came home after the dance. He came home early, and he had weed in his backpack. But I could smell it because it was like not wrapped or anything. and he thought he was going to get by, past mom with this stuff in his backpack.
Right.
And so that was like the beginning. And I remember I was just like, what are you doing? Like, what happened? I thought, you don't like drugs, and, this is not for you. And what happened to the whole, my body is my temple, attitude that you had? I mean, he was like embarrassed that mom caught him. He never wanted to disappoint me.
Yeah.
I hate to use the word obedient, but he strived to be an obedient son.
Right.
He wanted to make mom proud. So he was, I think, saddened with the fact that I found out, and I was so disappointed at that time.
Yeah.
And I was like one of those tough love type of, not all the time, but when it came to drugs or breaking the rules, it was like, no, there's consequences, and we don't allow that, and you can't do that. So I was a little hard on him. I took away his phone and did what I felt I had to do. And, he said it's not an issue, and I believed him. And then a couple weeks later, it happened again.
With weed again?
With weed again.
Okay.
And, this time I was angry. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
you're grounded for a year type of, response. Not really a year, but I handled it different, And then it happened again.
Yeah.
Shortly after that. And I just thought, what the hell does this kid need? Like, why are you, because I didn't smoke weed, so I was thinking, why? So I took him shopping. I was like, maybe he just needs to feel like.
Right. Just looking for answers. Yeah.
I was trying to help my boy, but he did share, like, well, a lot of kids do it, Mom. It's not that big of a deal. And it's like, no, it is a big deal. It's a gateway. I just never expected it to lead to where it ultimately ended.
Yeah.
So that was his drug of choice.
Yeah.
Was marijuana. But because of that, and because of the attitude and him withdrawing, and now his grades are starting to decline, he's no longer going to the gym. I'm noticing, like, he had beautiful skin, but anytime he'd have acne, I'm like, oh, something's not right. Like, it was like his body responding to whatever he was into at the time.
Right.
And so, and out of desperation, I took him to a therapist, and, he was not okay with it initially. He was like, Mom, like, there's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah.
Like, please don't do this. I don't, people are going to think I'm crazy. Or he was just so concerned about, the social stigma that accompanies
Going to therapy
or having to take medication or any of that. So unfortunately, trying to respect his privacy, I said, okay, son, we are going to keep this between us. And don't worry, I won't tell Sydney. No one will know. He's like, if you ever tell anyone, I won't do it again.
Sydney was his girlfriend. Yeah.
Sydney was his girlfriend. And so he, I kept my word, and, it was just something that we were dealing with, and, internally in our home. And he would go to therapy, and he'd comply. And I'll tell you that, after several months, he started to improve, and, he had bonded with this therapist. This guy would take a guitar, and he knew Elijah liked music, so he would connect with him on that level. And eventually saw a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist recommended an antidepressant and something to help him with his anxiety, because he was like having issues sleeping. I'd wake up to use the restroom in the middle of the night, and I'd see like his light on. But I also, now that I look back, I also think that was like the beginning of social media too. So I believe that he was on social media, and that was a whole other type of addiction that was starting up. So he starts taking the medication, and he does well, and I'm like, cool. He'd go into his therapy, they'd meet, and then they'd have me join in like the last 10 minutes to kind of just talk about the plan, or kind of summarize, give Mom a heads up as to what the next steps are, if you will. And so as his mood started to stabilize, and he started to improve, his grades went back up, he was going to the gym again, he was getting along great with Sydney, and life looked like, okay, cool, this is something that a part of our life that we went through together, and it's all behind us. Everything's going to be good. And so his concern was always pills, which really just drives me nuts because he did not want to take pills. I mean,
Right.
this kid would like look. I mean, there were Xanax and it was not a Xanax, it was a Prozalam.
Okay.
But it's like a generic.
Yeah.
And there were very low doses, I remember. I didn't think anything about it.
Yeah.
I really didn't. I just trusted the doctor that whatever he was giving to him was going to help my boy. And
Right.
it was,
Mm-hmm.
you know. However, every time we'd go into those therapy sessions, he'd kind of do like a reporting, like, okay, you know, the therapist, I believe his name was Mark. Okay, Mark, you know, my grades are back up. I wasn't late to school. You know, I've been on time to first period all month. And, you know, he'd always kind of share his progress, and it was awesome to see. And so, but he'd always say at the end, can I stop taking these meds now?
Yeah, he didn't want to take them.
He didn't want to take them. And, you know, eventually after several months, I'll say maybe 6 to 7 months, you know, he had been doing really well. And it was one of those days he walked in and kind of did his thing, you know, updated him with where he was, and can I stop taking these medications? And his therapist said, you know, he had to talk to the doctor. Long story short, they said, okay, we're going to see how you do without this.
Yeah.
We'll check in a couple weeks. And, you know, he was thrilled. You know, he ran out of that place, you know, and jumped in the air.
Yeah.
You know, like he was really happy about not having to take this. And he did well for several months after that, for maybe about, I want to say like maybe 3 months. But then, bam, I mean, I would notice little things, but it wasn't as intense as it was in the beginning.
Before.
Like the attitude.
Right.
And, you know, by little, he started to kind of fall back into the same pattern that led us to that point. And now I'm just like, dude, you know better. You know, I'm showing a lot of tough love. I didn't know
Right.
how else to really deal with it, but he, you know, eventually stopped taking the medication, and then his whole attitude, demeanor, everything was just like so quickly, just like, it seemed like, you know, within a matter of 3 months, he went from having everything, you know, under control again to like just a very quick downward spiral.
Yeah.
And downward spiral. You know, now he was approaching 18. So, you know, as his mom, I was on him. You know,
Yeah.
I would take him to the doctor. Like, I don't want him smoking weed. The therapist at Kaiser, because that's where he would receive some of his treatment. You know, I remember one woman said, well, it's kind of a rite to passage. And I'm like, well, not in my house, you know.
Yeah, and you and I were talking about that before we came on. You just got back from Washington, D.C. about a whole thing. I want to hear about that in a minute. But the pot that was around when I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s is not the same.
Yeah, the concentration,
Yeah.
I believe it was somewhere between 3 to 7% on average. And now the stuff that we're seeing in the streets, you know, when Elijah started smoking was much higher.
Right.
And now we're seeing, you know, the potency rates up to like 90%.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a completely different world when it comes to marijuana. And as a parent, you know, that wasn't my worst fear.
Right.
You know, I thought, I just want my son to end up, you know, using meth or heroin.
Yeah.
Obviously, I was not okay with it because he was a minor.
Sure.
And, I mean, it just wasn't part of our lifestyle, you know? And so, yeah, it was just different, and it caught me by surprise, but that's what it started with. And then, you know, now he's about to be 18, doesn't want to go back to treatment, and it's really hard to get things done, you know, unless the person is willing.
Right.
And
So he didn't want to go back to see that
he
therapist
did not want to go
at
back
all.
at all. He just said, nope, I'm not doing it. I remember one time I took him to another therapist, and he said, I have to go to the bathroom. And I'm waiting in there in the lobby. They call him. This kid booked it through the emergency escape and left.
Bolted, huh?
He's like,
That's how bad he didn't want to go to therapy.
He didn't like it. He was
Yeah.
uncomfortable. And I, again, at that time, I had no idea what the heck was going on in his little mind and his heart, what he was struggling with.
Right.
I just thought he was being a rebellious teenager.
Yeah.
And that's how I treated it.
Yeah.
You know, it was a very, you know, difficult time. It seemed like from the onset of his, like, because now he's 18, and now it's like, he's really like struggling. He's not as receptive. Mommy's good boy that would always,
right.
He was just like, screw that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was different. He changed on me before my eyes. From that moment until the time he died, it was about 2 years.
Yeah.
I never thought that would be the outcome for my son. I thought, if anything, he's going through a phase and we're going to get him what he needs to get him back to feeling good.
Yeah.
Instead, he starts self-medicating. He is playing track and field at this time.
Mm-hmm.
And also he had done wrestling as well. And he met new friends, and in this group of friends, taking pills was really popular. It was like in all the rap songs, and he did like rap music. Yeah. So, I think he fell into the hype,
right.
And because he had taken pills before, I think when it was presented to him, he thought he knew what the hell he was doing,
mm-hmm.
But as you and I know, it's way different now. There's no real pills out there, if you will,
right.
And if there is, it's really difficult to find, or come across.
Yeah, it's all just fentanyl pressed in the shape of whatever they're saying it is. Yeah. So he was in wrestling and track, started doing, and then so when did you find out there was more than just weed?
So, as time went, as the months went by and I started noticing his grades decline, I went into his room while he was at school one day and just tore up his room. I was like, something else is going on.
Right.
And I found a baggie with pills in them.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like the Xanax pills that he had taken before the Prozalam, the same type of pill. And I thought, what the hell? I was so surprised. I thought this kid was like, he lied. He never took the pills. Those are the pills that I had given him. What the heck? He never took them. I'm tripping out because he hated them so much.
Right.
But now I find his stash of, these pills, and that was like, whoa, what in the world? At first, when I confronted him about them, I really thought that he had just not taken them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And saved them.
Hit him and like cheeked him or something.
And I remember when I confronted him, I said, you weren't taking your pills. And he was so shocked, like, oh, she doesn't realize that I got these from somewhere else. Those aren't the same pills. And I remember the look of surprise on his face as I was like confronting him about this. And, I walked away that evening thinking that that's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't own up to the truth, which was he was now self-medicating on these pills.
Yeah.
And getting them from friends and people in our neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Older kids.
Right there in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I believe back then, there was a lot more real pills available, especially in the community that we grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
Not to knock it, but, our community, there's certain areas that, it's those pills are easy to access, or they were.
A lot of people go to psychiatrists and get prescribed a lot of things in these,
mm-hmm.
some of these areas in Orange County. Absolutely.
So it was just like a complete shock. And then the problem started. He didn't want to go to school anymore. And I'm like.
And he's a senior at this time. Okay.
I ended up, he got into a fight. He had never been into fights. He had never been in trouble as a kid. No behavioral issues. He got into his first fight, beat up some guy. I was like, where is this anger
mm-hmm.
coming from? He was just changing like very quickly. And so that was causing a lot of problems between us. I had threatened to send him to boarding school, to Mexico. I was throwing it all at him. And actually he did go willingly to the Army Navy Academy, which is like a boarding school out in, I believe it's San Juan Capistrano.
Okay.
And he did that for a summer and excelled. And I thought, okay, cool, second try.
Yeah.
This time it's going to work. It wasn't necessarily a treatment center, but, he did get some sober time and some new experience while he was there. And he did great.
Yeah.
I really wish I would have been able to keep him there. He was accepted into their program, but it was so expensive at the time. I couldn't do it. So he came back home, and Now he's a senior. He's not wanting to go to school. I end up removing him from school and putting him on independent study because it was just, he didn't want to be at school anymore.
Wouldn't do it.
And this is a kid that, like, his entire life since he was in elementary, I'd come home from work and he'd have his homework laid out. Mommy, I did this. The room was clean. I didn't have to be on him.
Yeah.
He was disciplined. He was known for being smart and known for being very good with math and science. And now I'm seeing this beautiful boy that is just completely losing interest in everything. So I thought, okay, it's the drugs. Maybe, I need to get him out of this environment. So I did. I pulled him out of school, put him on independent studies, and I packed up our apartment and I moved to Laverne.
Oh, okay.
And so we lived in Laverne for a year, and while we were there, he was in an outpatient treatment, program with Kaiser, and he found himself a job. He was always working. This boy loved to work. I mean, since he was the moment that he could get a worker's permit, he had a job at Pavilions and at Wendy's. He enjoyed it.
Yeah.
He liked having money and doing things the honest way.
Yeah.
And so when we got to Laverne, things seemed like they were on the up and up. We got away from, I thought, we just got to get away from his friends or whatever influences. But then he started to struggle there as well. And so shortly after that, I realized that he was taking these pills, like I was finding them now. Now he was, I'd get home sometimes and he was just like really kind of lethargic and out of it. He was sleeping a whole lot. And I thought, what the heck's the matter with this kid? And then I would find pills from time to time and we would be fighting about it or arguing about it. And it was just a really difficult time for us. But in the end, he was like, I don't want this life either, Mom. Like, I'll do whatever you want me to do. And I said, it's for you. It's not for me,
Yeah.
And on his own accord, he went to a treatment center, and he
he got to a point where he asked for help.
He asked for help. He went to a residential treatment center in Orange County, and he completed it. He was cooperative. I thought, okay, cool. Again, okay.
Yeah.
This is all going to be behind us soon.
We're out of the woods. Yeah.
And it was like, from that point on, this is now like, he's 18 now. So from that point on, it was so difficult to see him, but he would stay clean for about 3 months and then relapse. It was almost like a cycle. Like every 3 months he'd be doing good and we were back on track, and then he'd relapse, and that relapse would send him, all the way back. It was horrible. It would last for a week or two, and
but right back to where he was.
Back to where he was, and then he'd say, okay, I'll go to treatment, Mom. Like, I don't want to do this. And he would go to another treatment program, finish, and come back out, find a job. He started going to 12-step meetings, and I have this really cool picture that he sent me with his coffee in the cups. He's like, it's my turn to do coffee.
Yeah.
He was trying.
Yeah.
He wanted to be, he had a desire to do well and to be sober, but this drug was just taking over his life before our eyes. So in and out of rehabs for about 2 years, like I said, it was almost like every 3 months we were going back into a new treatment center. He'd do well, relapse, and then he'd go back in, do well, relapse. And in 2020, actually it was 2019 November, he was at a place in Pasadena. I got him out of Orange County again because I thought it has to be Orange County, but
it's the geography, right?
It was everywhere.
Yeah.
That this issue isn't just, it's not isolated.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, I found this great program in Pasadena, let's give it a shot. And while he was there, it was at the Gooden Center. I don't know. Yeah.
The Gooden Center, yeah.
And, he completed and then went into a sober living, and I thought, oh, cool. I remember him showing me, the place that he was going to be living, and I thought, okay, well, this is the steps that we got to take.
Yeah.
But while he was in sober living, he ends up kind of that same pattern.
Right.
So anyway, while he was there, that's when he disclosed what had happened to him as a child. And I mean, that was November 2019. By September 2020, he was dead. So we never did anything about what happened to him. His based on the recommendation of his therapist, she said, what's more important to you, revenge or your son's mental health and him staying sober? And I'm like, my son, of course.
Absolutely.
She said, you guys will have an opportunity to take care of that, but let's focus on keeping him, sane and sober. So that's what we did. Shortly after that, my son rededicated his life to Christ and was going to church.
That's beautiful.
It really was. It was the most proud. My boy was smart. I mean, I have awards from, first day of school type of, thing, but I've never been so proud of my son, to see him, at an altar call, praying, laying hands on other people, praying for other people's salvation, and trying to be an encouragement, sharing his testimony. Wow, he blew my mind. And because of that, he was like the bridge that the Lord used to get me closer to God.
Yeah.
And so at this point, he was at a faith-based recovery, because we had already tried all the other ones. And I said, man, we tried this, we tried that. You need some Jesus,
Right.
I didn't know what to do. And so by the grace of God, he went into a faith-based recovery home, and he really, got to learn the word there. And it was just beautiful. It's sad, I thought a lot of people say, aren't you angry that, that didn't work? And I'm like, it worked. My son's in heaven.
Right.
I'm certain of that, and so because of that, I'm able to stand here and talk to people and share, what I do. But, while he was in this facility, it was Father's Day now, 2020. And I remember him calling me, and he had like this joy in his voice, like excitement. And he says, Happy Father's Day. And I'm like, oh, thanks, son. He would always say Happy Father's Day to me.
That's neat.
And then he says, so you're not going to guess what I just did. And I'm like, what? But he was just like, you could hear the freedom. There was like this
Some
lightness,
relief,
like a little kid, so excited, And he says, I called my grandma, his father's mom, and I told her to tell my dad that I forgive him. And I was like, what? What? No.
Yeah.
But he's like, Mom, I thought you would be happy for me. This is what the Word of God says, that we are to forgive if we want to be forgiven. And I just thought, oh my God, I'm sorry, God. I'm sorry, son. I respected him and his decision, and we left it there. That was, Father's Day in June, his Father's Day. By September, he was gone. He, at this point, was with that grandmother who he reached out to. She had just retired, and asked him, if he would keep her company. She lived in a sketchy part of Long Beach, and she was concerned about, the riots that were supposed to happen in her area, and him being, grandma's boy. He asked if he could go there, and I talked to the grandma, and I said, well, you know what we're dealing with? If you're gonna have him here, let's work as a team to try to support him. If you see something, please say something.
Yeah.
I know he's an adult, but I wanted to teach, him responsibilities. So we had like this plan, he was working at this time again. So we had a little budget for him. He was supposed to save so much money, and we thought we had it all worked out. Well, this is 2020, and there's really no access to, no easy access, I should say, to getting to our doctors. And because of his issue, like, doctors were very reluctant to give him what he was asking for, which was usually like, now he's like, he would try to BS from time to time. Like, he got some dental work, and the doctor gives him oxys. He gave him like 10 of them.
Oh, wow.
Man, that started something else. And now no doctors were like willing to give him anything. So he made a mistake. He went onto Snapchat and reached out to someone that he thought he he could trust.
Yeah.
Someone that he had talked to in the past, and that he, arranged for, a delivery of these pills. Not fentanyl. He didn't ask for fentanyl. And he purchased 15 pills that night. This guy drops them off. Probably about 9:45. Maybe 11 o'clock he calls me. We were supposed to have breakfast the next morning. I was trying to keep him with me throughout the day because it was a church day. Wednesdays we would go to church. And I remember him kind of like trying to weasel his way out of it. And I told him, I hate when you cancel our plans. Like, I was really looking forward to it. And, we ended up hanging up. When I hung up that phone, I felt like this ugly feeling. So I start praying for him. And as I'm praying, he's messaging me. All right, Mom, I'll stay with you. We'll hang out the whole day. He's like, I love you. I miss you. I had just seen him the week before. We spoke every day, but he had been working so much, and I was going to school at the time. So that was probably the longest that we had gone without actually seeing each other. And, I went to bed after I was done praying. I replied to him. I said, angels are there with you. I don't know why he said that, but I know now that it was something that he needed to hear in that moment. Yeah. And I'm just grateful that those were the last types of words that he heard from his mom, and I love you. Yeah. And my understanding is that he received that message and began to type, okay, Mama, tomorrow let's have coffee and we'll read our Bibles. Falls. Drops his phone, never gets to press send. And they find him at the edge of his bed in what looked like a praying position. He was on his knees with his hands like this. I mean, people will say, that's how people die when they die from fentanyl. And I'm like, he looked peaceful. Yeah. I mean, I didn't want that. And for what it's worth, I'd like to think that he was reaching out to God in his last moments. Yeah. There's it was the hardest thing to ever witness. Yeah. Seeing my little boy being pulled out of that room in a black body bag, it was it's traumatizing.
Can't imagine.
But it opened up a whole new world for me, like things that I had no idea about. I thought I knew about everything. I worked in addiction. I was a drug and alcohol counselor for many years. That was how I started my career as a young mom. And I worked for the county. I worked with people who were struggling with addiction. I worked in HIV prevention, so I knew about, drugs that would transmit HIV easily through sharing of needles, and he knew about these things. But we never knew about fentanyl. Yeah. I had never heard of that.
It's a whole new ball game. Yeah.
It sure was. Yeah. And so, I mean, it was like, how did I not know about this? Why, obviously I was very distraught in the beginning, but why didn't anyone tell me about this? Why haven't I heard anyone talk about this? Why didn't the therapist? And, I wanted to, why? And I don't think he knew that what he was doing was fentanyl.
No, most of those kids don't. Yeah. Even if they do, it's like they don't think it's going to kill them. So, yeah.
So that just kind of propelled me into what I'm doing now. And
so tell me a little bit, because when we were talking at lunch, you were telling me a little bit about the dealer, that story. So if you wouldn't mind, would you mind sharing that, how that went down?
So that was a whole, my spidey senses kicked in, Yeah. I think that God gave me the ability to do what I did, but I tracked this guy and I found him on social media. I created a fake Snapchat account and added him.
So just for the parents out there, your son bought drugs using Snapchat.
Yes.
So,
and the entire transaction was made through Snapchat.
And Snapchat, the messages disappear, so as parents, it's a little harder.
They do, but for whatever reason, those messages were saved on his phone.
Oh, he saved them.
He saved some of those messages. I mean, there's some gaps in between, but I could see that he had talked to this kid weeks before. That kid had shared his address. He was from Santa Ana. Yeah. His address was there in plain sight, saved. You know, I didn't know his name or what he looked like at that time. And there was gaps, but I could tell that they had been in communication for at least a week before this transaction went down. And so what really happened was when he died, the detectives confiscated his cell phone, right? And they had it in evidence. And so the narcotics detective that was assigned to my son's case called me one day. This was like maybe a week after he had died. And I'm bugging him like, do we know who it is? Do we know what happened? Did he mean to take this? What was it? You know, I'm asking a million questions. And this detective calls me and says, you know, ma'am, I'm so sorry. I was looking through your son's phone. You know, we were able to access Snapchat. And while I was investigating, he's the one that told me that he read a message that said, you know, the 15 pills, because I didn't actually see that part, but this detective did. So he's telling me what he had found on my son's phone. And he says as he's reading it and documenting this for the case, if you will, that my son's phone just shuts off right in the middle of his investigation and all that disappears. And he's like, so, you know, your son's phone was new. We don't have that technology. It can be months. And I'm like, can I have the phone? I will take it into a same-day repair shop and have it back to you by the end of the day. Please give me that phone. Yeah. And they did. They brought it to me. I took it to a cell phone repair shop, and they fixed it right away. And I was able to get into his Snapchat, so I had seen the guy's name. You know, it wasn't his full name, but it was missing a letter.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, excuse me. I got the sniffles. And so I had seen some of the messages that had been saved. I don't know if the detective saved them or if Elijah saved them, but there was saved messages, enough for me to find this person. Yeah. And so, you know, I asked the detectives, can I look through his phone? And they said, sure, just don't erase anything. And so I did what I did. I had the phone till the next morning. I stood up all night. I went through every single message, wrote down every single name, every single number, took pictures of all his friends on his Snapchat, and I said, I'm going to find out who did this. And I did. And that person was deliberately selling fake products to people that he called friends. You know, he'd say things like, oh, you know, only the best quality, and I got ya, you know, and he was like super friendly drug dealer, you know, on social media, enticing people with photos, photo after photo after photo of various narcotics and weapons. I mean, so I was still hopeful at this time that, you know, that the Long Beach Police Department would find and see what I was seeing and do something about it. In the end, I mean, they did some work, you know, but I was told case closed, you know, and your son should have never went onto the dark market, and these crimes are looked at as victimless crimes, so basically don't hold your breath. And I thought, okay.
It actually came out and said these crimes were looked at as victimless crimes.
Victimless crimes.
Oh, man.
And I said, okay, I can understand the logic behind that, but there's, okay, my son made a mistake. Yeah. And he paid for it with his life. Yeah. But there's a drug dealer out there that's selling drugs right now. Yeah. You guys need to stop him. Yeah. And so...
And not only that, it's like that, just that attitude, like those drug addicts, unless it's somebody's son that they know or daughter, I mean, it's like it affects us all. And so and hopefully that perception is changing, but that's
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of, you know, the work that I'm trying to do is to talk about these issues and break that stigma. Yeah. So at that point, you know, I just felt like defeated. And then that's when I started following his Snapchat with my fake account and documenting all the things that he would post. And so this guy was very cocky and arrogant, and he was very flashy with Rolexes and jewelry and cars and, you know, designer bags. He'd have a designer women's bag on him. So when I'd see the locations that he'd post, I would call the watch commander for that city. You know, Irvine, I need to speak to the watch commander. There's this guy, I believe he killed my kid. He's selling fake pills, and he's posted up at so-and-so motel advertising on Snapchat. And, you know, they started looking into it. And so he was arrested numerous times after Elijah's death, but always booked and released.
Yeah.
I mean, that kid wouldn't even be in there overnight.
Yeah.
I think he was arrested 4 times, at least, after. And so out of frustration, one day I see this kid, he had just been released, and I'm thinking, man, that sucks, you know. But then he posted he's in Las Vegas. He's at a Gucci store, and he's like shopping, and I was not in a good headspace. I lost it. I blew my cover, and I said, look, you know, young man, you must not know what the hell you're doing. You know, I didn't know if he knew. I didn't even know that people did that way. I didn't know the deceptive practices that are happening with fentanyl. I just thought, this is some stupid ass kid, excuse my language, you know, that probably is selling for some dope dealer that he doesn't even realize, you know, what the heck he's really into. You know, his stuff is bunk. Or, you know, I remember back in the day there was like bad heroin going around, and, you know, people were talking about it, and I thought maybe that's this type of situation. So I told him, I confronted him via Snapchat, and I said, you must not know what you're doing. The stuff, you know, I told my son trusted you. You know, he purchased 15 pills, and what you gave to him was fentanyl. He took 1 pill, by the way. He ordered 15. We found 14 the next morning.
And it was 1.
And it was just 1 pill. Those 14 pills, they were tested, and according to the narcotics detective, were all lethal doses of fentanyl.
Oh, wow.
I find it's not like comforting, but some relief knowing that my son didn't share that with anyone. He was in the music, you know, scene, and I know that he really wanted to go see his producer that day, and that's why he was trying to ditch me at church, you know, when we were on the phone. So there's just a part of me that's like, I'm glad. I don't know that he would have shared or not, but I mean, he bought 15 of them. Maybe he would have. I don't know. Yeah. I think if he would have hurt someone, he would have killed himself. Like maybe not literally, but it would have rocked his world. Him.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of like how it started. And when I did that, he blocked me, obviously, and I had already done my whole makeup. I was like, I knew who his mama was, grandma, baby daddy, all that stuff. I had it all worked out. I had like graphs on my house. So when I started getting harassed after that, I knew exactly who the people that were harassing me were. You know? I remember there was one woman, Veronica from Las Vegas. She tries to intimidate me, some gangster, you know. And I said, girl, you better go take care of them 3 kids that you have before I call CPS on you, living app. I knew who these people were, and they backed off. I mean, obviously it's God, you know. He's got my back, and he gave me this boldness that I've never knew I had, you know. But long story short, you know, after, you know, them telling me that case closed, I said, okay, well, I'm going to file a civil suit on this guy because you guys aren't going to do anything, you know. I knew he didn't have money, or at least, you know, legitimately, you know. It wasn't about money for me. It was about a principle. Like, look, you bad guy, you know, you killed someone, and you're not going to get in trouble for it, but you need to know that I know that you did it. You did it. Like, that was just something in my brain that I just felt like he needs to know that I know that he killed my kid. And so I opened up a civil lawsuit, and then, you know, nobody really wanted to help at that time, to be honest. Everyone was kind of shining me off, and then I started hearing of other parents who came from different backgrounds, and, you know, and they were getting assisted. And I'm like, how are you guys getting help and not this little Latina over here with the drug boy, you know, drug addict son? Because that's how it was. You know, these parents were not Latinos, and their kids were not necessarily addicts, or so they say. And so I asked, and it turned out that they were working with the DEA. So I reached out to the DEA and said, hey, same thing that happened to them happened to me. I need some help. And by the grace of God, I got some amazing agents, and they took it undercover and handled it. This guy's in prison right now. He's in federal custody. He was federally indicted. He was marshaled and denied bail. This boy didn't know what the hell he was up against. Wow. He just signed a plea agreement. He'll be in prison for at least 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Good.
For this crime. I mean, it doesn't make me feel like any better necessarily, but
Yeah.
I feel better knowing that one less heartless, because at this point he was heartless. Now he knew what he did, and he continued to sell that poison.
Yeah.
You know, even after being confronted, I told him, you know what, man, I know your mom, because I literally knew everything about this kid, and I had empathy for him. I thought maybe this kid is just so desperate because his mom was sick.
Mm-hmm.
It looked like he lived in the hood, didn't have much money, you know. Probably he was the oldest in his family. He had younger siblings. I'm like trying to figure out, like, he's not doing this on purpose.
Right.
Who would do that?
Mm-hmm.
But he was, and he
Yeah.
didn't care. And so after confronting him, he continued. I mean, it's like a movie. There was one instance where on Snapchat, he opens a Goyard, you know,
Mm-hmm.
designer bag, and in there has a big wads of cash, and he's just flossing on Snapchat. Hard work pays off, he writes, you know. And as he's showing, you know, flashing his stuff, I catch a glimpse at the background, and I see it's a CarMax dealership. I'm like, this kid's gonna go buy a car right now. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Something in my, well, I had already known, so I'll even take it back further, because this is kind of interesting. If I'm saying too much, you could tell me.
No,
to
go
stop.
ahead. Keep going.
So there's a point where, so before that situation, I didn't know, because the detectives had told me, we don't know who this is. It could be anyone. They could be using a fake account, fake names, blah, 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 blah. Like, very discouraging. Like, case closed, case closed. We're not going to find this guy. And he had posted something. I have a photo I can share with you guys later, but he posts a picture of him pushing a grocery cart, and it's packed to the rim, you know, just hundreds of dollars worth of groceries. And I could see the cart, because he's videoing it,
Right.
and it says, you know, I noticed the colors red and white, Superior Market, and then he has a Little Caesars pizza box on the top.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see only the end of the receipt. It said, like, I don't remember the exact amount, but it was a couple $100, like $203.58. And I could see that he bought Oreos. That's the only thing on that stupid little receipt that I could see. So this is a time that they told me it can be anyone. We don't know where he's at. It can, you know. So I surveyed every single Superior Warehouse grocery outlet in the state of California, and every single Little Caesars pizza. And then I compared them. I said, where are these Little Caesars? I called them all. There's several in California, but in the city, in Orange County, there was like, I think 3 of them. One of them was in Santa Ana. So I felt something. I had already had an idea based on an address, but now I knew for sure this kid's from Orange County.
Yeah.
And so I called Superior Warehouse, and I know I'm saying this on air, but I was like, hello, I'm a detective working a homicide case, and I need you to pull surveillance for this date, for this amount. I need a clear image of the person that purchased this. I know that there was a transaction made on this day around the approximate time for this amount, and for sure there were some Oreo cookies. Can you help me identify? They pulled that. And they called me, and when it was time to release the information, they're like, okay, where's your credentials? And I was like, what I meant was I'm a volunteer detective.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, girl. But I was able to call the narcotics officer and say, hey, man, I know you said you couldn't find him, but now we got a clear photo on this kid. Go to Superior Warehouse. They need to see your credentials, and they will release that footage. I don't know if that ever happened, but he eventually reopened the case and filed it with the district attorney's office in Los Angeles. District attorney denied it. So then, you know, I continue with my search, and now I reach out to the DEA and I share with them what I know. I end up finding, so then, you know, going back to the CarMax story, I'm sitting there and they're like, no one's doing anything. And I see this guy showing all this money, and I'm like, hey, there is 2 CarMaxes here in Orange County. One of them is in Buena Park, and the other one is in Costa Mesa. So I drove to the first one, and in my spidey senses, as I call them, I knew it wasn't that one. Drove to the one in Costa Mesa, I knew it was that one. I walked in, and there he was, signing his papers. I thought I was going to kill him. I wanted to kill him, but I couldn't. Instead, all the anger turned into shaking, and I felt like I was going to vomit and faint at the same time. But there he was. I could have punched him in the back of the head,
Yeah.
I went outside. I called the detective and said, hey, you say you had no idea who the hell this kid was. You weren't going to be able to find him. Well, he is right here with his ID, getting ready to buy a car. And he flipped out on me. Get the hell out of there right now. You're interfering with an investigation. I said, I thought you said case closed.
Yeah.
Get out here. He went, and it's, he was able to share a lot of that information with the DEA. And, after about 2 years of him continuing to do what he was doing, they got him. They got him.
Isn't that crazy? It takes 2 years for something that's just so remedial and like as far as an investigation goes and so obvious, and that's insane to me. Like we were talking about the fentanyl numbers the other day, and like somebody compared it to 9/11, and every 11 days a 9/11's happening with overdoses.
Yep.
And it's just like you watch the president last night talk about it for maybe 10 or 15 seconds, and then the Republican response maybe got 20 seconds. And it's just, that's crazy to me. So
it is. It's disgusting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's everywhere now, and I'm hoping that the more we do these conversations and share these stories, that we could alert other families,
and that's what we can do about it on the ground floor, is talk about it as much as possible and get the message out there. And more people that I know that are not around addiction or never have been around addiction, this is starting to touch them, and
absolutely. It doesn't make me feel good to know that he's like that. I don't get no joy knowing that someone's going to be in prison forever, but he definitely didn't deserve to be free.
No, and he spent 2 more years contributing to the problem. So
I have messages. I seen him post things, and I'm like, how does anyone trust this kid? On one Snapchat, he shows a photo of what appeared to be a crime scene. When I got to my son's grandmother's house the day he died, there was some patrol units and other EMS kind of hanging out in the front, same type of setup. And he writes, my shit always hits. Another day, another dollar. And it was on after that. I said, I cannot sit back and watch this little mother effer sell this poison up and down. I could see him up and down the 22 and the 405, because he would share. And then he would share his location so boldly and open. He would post up in different shopping centers near a bank. And shops open, from his car. So, we go to court next week, actually.
For sentencing.
I mean, it's not for Elijah's death. But the day that he got popped, he had enough fentanyl to kill over 250,000 people or something crazy like that. I mean, it was enough to get him to where he's at. He was looking at a 20 years to life sentences, but he took this plea deal.
Yeah.
And I mean, my goal was to, stop him from hurting other people. He was doing this in my neighborhood, in my backyard.
Right.
And I understand, I remember the detective said, I can't do what you do. There's not enough hours in the day. And I said, okay, well, I'll help you.
No problem. We'll get it done.
Yeah.
So when did you start Project Eli? Tell me a little bit about that, what your mission is.
Project Eli was, can't really take all the credit for it, but my nephew, who was, looked up to Elijah, that was his big cousin, was really affected after Elijah died. And he wanted to be there with me. He wanted to stay with his auntie. And, I mean, he would hear me wailing, in the middle of the night. And he was there. And I remember one morning he was just so angry and said, oh, auntie, I'm going to get this guy. Don't worry, And I'm like, oh, no, we're not. Yeah. please don't, like he was just angry too and hurting. I doubt that he would have done anything. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I would never want him to do anything.
Right.
That's more of what I meant.
Yeah.
I don't doubt him. I just wouldn't have wanted that,
Yeah.
But so I told him, we can't do that. And, my faith level was just, it was extraordinary. Like, I felt like the Lord was carrying me through this time. And he gave me that idea. I said, we got to warn people and we need to talk to people. And he says, we should do something, yeah, you're right. Let's tell as many people. We should start like a program or something. And I'm like, what would you name it? And he said, I don't know, Project Eli. And I'm like, okay, let's do it, and that was the inspiration. It was really to teach, my family, my nephew and nieces, that when bad things happen, you don't have to succumb to the same evil that was behind whatever it is that affected you,
Yeah.
And that was, shortly after Elijah died, we had the name and this idea, but I really got on the ground running with this. The following year, I quickly started networking with other parents. I was meeting through social media, mostly on Facebook. I met another local mom who lost her little boy, who lived in Aliso Viejo, and we started partnering together. And we had the same concerns, and we wanted to warn everyone. So we'd work together and go anywhere that would listen to us and share our story. And it kind of took off from there. And I started getting support from some of my local leaders, and specifically our senator, Janet Nguyen and Diane Dixon. They've been, wow, I could not have been here have gone this far without their support. They really extended that olive branch and said, you want to do this? We're going to help you do that.
Good.
And so I've been able to, I call it a tour with both ladies, and share not only the message of what is going on, these deceptive practices of illicit fentanyl. And I know people like fentanyl too. I know that people are addicted. That's their drug of choice. But I want to say that they probably didn't start that way,
No, it doesn't start that way. It starts with the pills, and then all of a sudden, I realize I'm taking fentanyl.
Exactly.
And it's like, why not just take it? So, yeah.
So, we've been doing town halls throughout Orange County. I've been able to speak to the students at the school that my son attended, Los Al High, and work closely in my community. And then, now it's like a whole other level of like, wow, I didn't know I could do this.
Yeah.
I went to the White House,
Yeah.
I got to go into the White House and meet with ONDCP. That's like their drug policy.
Was that just last week, or you were in DC last week, right?
I just came back yesterday from DC. No, this was about a year ago.
Okay.
And I partnered with the DEA, and they invited us to summits where they educate us on all the most current facts, and that's given me some the ability to provide accurate information and really know what the heck I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Amongst working with the county's healthcare agency, I was able to partner with, I worked for the County of Orange for about 10 years. And so after losing Elijah, I reached out to the director, who at the time was Dr. Clayton Chow. I don't think he's no longer in charge, but he was so kind. He invited me into the office, and we had our first podcast. And then after that, I started partnering with, other department heads, and we were spreading the word as much as we could.
Yeah.
We're still doing that, So it's been a really interesting journey. I never thought I'd be doing this. After working for the county, I was working as a makeup artist, and I was like, I don't want to do hard work anymore. I just want to have fun and look cute. And I remember thinking once, man, all those years that I spent working as a group facilitator, as a counselor, as an educator on different topics, whether it was drugs, HIV, STDs, psychosis. That was what I did for all those years.
Yeah.
I thought, how weird that I'm never going to be able to use it again.
Yeah.
And then 2 years later, I was like, surprise, surprise, girl, you got a little break.
Yeah.
Let's get to work.
There you go.
And so,
what do you think the biggest thing you've realized out of dealing with all these the politics. What is it do you think that we're missing with the fentanyl crisis? Why is it so rampant and killing so many people? I mean, there's the supply side and there's the demand side. You know, what is it that we're...
It's not just one thing.
Yeah.
I don't believe that. I believe there's multiple issues going on. One, in the beginning, I believe that people were really looking at this as a victimless crime. Oh, well, that was their choice. Now they're dead.
Yeah.
You know, and then more families started, you know, sharing their stories and their experiences. But I think the perception of an addict and someone that dies in this manner was just kind of disregarded as, oh, well, another
just
statistic.
Another addict, just another street kid.
I think all these reforms in criminal justice that are trying to come about, I get it. Like, you know, there is people that have been locked up for years and have gone through things that they shouldn't have gone through, but there's also a lot of bad people like this dude that was selling, that had no regard for human life, and the deceptive practice of selling one thing as a Percocet or an Oxy when really it's fentanyl, and now you know it is, and you're still advertising it as such. Not okay. So I think the laws, you know, we become very lenient, you know, in an effort to, I always hear people say, we don't want to go back to, you know, the old war on drugs. And it's like, hey, man, I get it, you know. I understand that. I didn't grow up with the father because he was in prison because of this war on drugs. He went to prison for years for weed and other, I mean, I'm not minimizing it. He you know, he did the crime, he had to pay the time. But we're up against something that we've never seen. So
it's completely different.
This is anything that we thought, you know, we were up against. This is unlike anything we've ever experienced or seen. So,
and it's killing more people than anything age 18 to 45, like overdoses. That wasn't true 5 years ago. That wasn't true 6 years ago. Definitely wasn't true 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I never even really heard of fentanyl.
And I think, you know,
except maybe I heard of like a patch or something that my mom had to get when she was in the hospital, but I didn't even know what it was till probably 5 or 6 years ago.
I also think a part of it is like the lack of knowledge. So I know I said earlier that I didn't know about fentanyl, and I didn't know about fentanyl, but I do remember when I was living in Laverne, hearing about this baseball star from the Angels who had died, and I think the cover said fentanyl, and I just thought, oh, how sad, what a tragedy.
I remember that.
And I was just kind of disregarded it because my kid didn't like fentanyl, so it didn't really apply to me. And I think that same attitude is, you know, a lot of people have that same attitude, like, oh, what is that? No, we don't like that. So, whereas if it would have said Xanax or something that I knew or marijuana, I would have probably paid a little closer attention. So I think a big part of it is a lot of us parents have no idea what we're up against. It's different, you know, social media. I didn't have that growing up. I mean, it's like easy access to everything that as a parent you try so hard to keep your kid from. Now it's at their fingertips. Everything's at their fingertips. It's scary. It really is. So. And then I don't know, some of these politicians, you know, I don't want to say too much, but... No, go ahead. Yeah. I you know, I'm trying to get them to join us for some bills, so I'll just try to keep it positive. Keep it positive. I think some of them, you know, just have this, I don't know, like this perception of, different perception of what is really happening. You know, like an attitude of disregard. I don't really know how to explain it, but you know, we have some politicians that do care, or at least they're out there talking about it, and I'm trying to focus on those ones. And there's good and bad people in every realm, you know, in every circle. And it's not a partisan issue. We got 300 people a day dying, like. But a lot of people think, well, if we start making it an issue, more people are going to be in jail. There's so many people on one side trying to empty out jails, and then you have other people saying, hey, we got to hold them accountable, which that's where I'm at, you know. Seeing my dad, you know, not having a dad around growing up, it was hard. But I knew that I was not going to go out there and break no rules, because if you break the rules, you can get in trouble and go to jail. That's what happened.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's just a different time.
And there's like you said, there's a complete difference in, I'm not minimizing other drugs, but fentanyl is the thing that's killing people. That's the thing that has increased overdoses to where we're at.
And it's illicit fentanyl. It's synthetic. It's nasty. You know, this stuff, I'm sure you're well aware, they're making this stuff in trap houses and ranchos, with the lights off.
Yeah.
It's not, there's no quality assurance going on.
Yeah.
I think people, I don't want to say they're naive, but sometimes we trust too much. I know that was with, Elijah trusted this person. He thought, oh, he's calling me my boy, and, we need to really educate people about how this is happening, because so many people like me, my kid's not into fentanyl. Too bad, so sad. It doesn't apply to me. And it's like, but you have to know what's happening and how this is, taking over.
Yeah. So two questions to end with. The first one is what's your message to today's parent out there dealing in the world of this crisis with fentanyl, social media, like you talked about, everything at their fingertips? What would you want to say to the parents out there?
Take it serious. This is not you need to talk to your kids. You need to understand that it's happening every day to people just like them and us. So many of us had this idea, like, not my child.
Right.
I was one of those moms. I was a very proud mom. If somebody would have told me your son's going to end up an addict and then overdosing, I would have punched them.
Right.
I would have never in a million years, because we have this perception of our children. This drug is just so vile. If it doesn't kill you, it's going to snatch you by the neck and make you their subject, the drug, if you will. My goal is to warn people. That's what Project Eli is all about. We're self-funded. I was in D.C. on my own dime, and it's not the first time I've had to do that, and I'll keep doing it until I can't.
Now that leads me to my second question. If somebody wants to help out Project Eli or get involved or make a donation, where do they go to? How do they reach out to you?
They can go on my website, www.projecteli.info. There's ways to donate there. If you're not able to do that, there's a ton of information on there. I try to keep things current. Share it. I don't just have that website up there to look pretty. It's for the community, and I hope that at the very least they'll share the information with those they care about. That's really, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. Eventually I'd like to expand and do other things, because I realize, the drug is what killed my kid, but that trauma and the hurt, the healed part of him, I want to help other kids that are in those situations too. So this is just the beginning for me. My only goal is to save lives, though, and to help kids like not just like my boy, but I'm gonna start there.
Yeah. Well, Perla, it's a beautiful thing what you're doing to honor Elijah's life, and thank you for coming on and sharing your story. It was very touching and heartfelt, and thank you so much for letting me be a witness and get to talk to you about your story. Thank you.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
All right.